Okay, for people joining this live stream, this is yet another episode in trying to finish off database integration functionality for version 12 of Wolfram Language. Okay, so last time we had finished going through, if I'm not mistaken, the functions. Let's see. Wait a minute. Database connectivity, is that not reviewed? No, this has been reviewed, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I think I missed that one.
Okay, why is that red there? I think that was a bug that I asked you to get fixed when I tried to do a 12 plus thing.
Yeah. I reported, but I need to remind them.
Somebody should just fix it. I mean, it's just a glitch in the internal structure there. Okay, so this relational database function.
I think we don't have there the new symbols about database connect and database disconnect. Should they? I'm not sure if we link them.
Look, it might be useful to have a line that just lists them there. So what are they now? So they're from here, database connect, database. Oh, no, they're manual disconnection. We don't need those. But what about database reference? Is that relevant here? I think that is relevant. Is it? Can you speak up, please? Okay. Anybody hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So do you think it's relevant or not?
Yeah, yes. Why not?
Well, or is it sufficient to just say, will people mostly use database reference or not? Or will they mostly just use relational database?
Probably a relational database.
Okay, then let's not put that on this page. Okay. Okay, this page looks fine. Consider that page, Andrea, consider that page done.
Okay, great. I think the mostly ones that we are missing also that you never have looked at them are the first symbols that like sample, aggregated, extended, and combined.
Okay. Now we started going through this over these last time, right? So Carlo, I assume you made the updates from last time, right? Carlo?
Yes. I was confused if you said Carlo or Carla. I was about to say that's Andrea.
I know it's Andrea.
Yeah.
I knew because I just said that.
Yeah. So yeah, I shortened I tried to make them a little less verbose.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so the examples here. Why are those the first few entities?
Who knows why they ordered that way?
It's a little confusing to say first few. Why don't we say containing n entities from and then say okay, so now okay. Is this up to n, or is this Does that mean up to n?
Yes, it's up to n.
Okay, I think could it be something that is an extended sorted entity class? Do you understand my question?
What do you mean by that?
Okay.
Yeah,
If it is sorted,
it's not guaranteed in that case.
okay.
No, wait. No, I might be wrong. Leonie, do you remember if it adds an extra layer of select if you're just adding an annotation?
It depends on what's the type of the annotation, I think, because if it uses another annotation, then it might. So we don't guarantee that it's always not adding an extra layer of select, Carl.
Gives the first n entities from the internal representation of class. This representation may change when operations are done on class. Is that correct? Is that correct?
What kind of operations?
I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to. You said
Yes.
it may not stay the same. So
I think it's one way to say it. Yes, yeah.
Okay. So then, sorted entity class can be used to define a specific ordering for entities. I think that's enough to say that.
No, but if you delete the next line, then it's a little bit confusing, I think.
Which next line?
The one you just deleted, because you have to somehow connect it to say that the class inside the sampled entity class has to be sorted entity class for that order to persist. You kind of say it, but
no,
it's
okay, I understand. I understand. Okay, so can be used to define an entity class with to be used to represent an entity class with a specific ordering. I'm trying to avoid just saying you apply. I mean, we can clearly give examples down below in which you give sampled entity class of sorted entity class. But I'm trying to avoid saying that that's the naked form that you always have to use, because I don't think it is.
naked form?
Sampled entity class of sorted entity class. It can be more complicated than that. Do you get what I'm saying?
For all other cases, I don't think we can guarantee the ordering.
Are you sure? Okay.
Yes. At least in the context of relational databases.
Well, I don't know about other things. So I think this is sufficient. Basically, it gives a hint that if you want something with, I mean, we can give examples down below.
Why don't you then just write sorted entity class as class or something like that to connect it to the class argument of the sample entity class?
Because that's specifically not what I was trying to say. Okay, if you say, okay, look, Are you happy with this?
Yes.
All right. I mean, it's not.
Shouldn't it say something?
Okay.
Yeah.
This is about all we're going to get here.
That didn't work right.
Does it give class or is it equivalent to class? Do you understand what I'm asking?
It's the latter. It's equivalent to class. It does not return.
Okay. Yeah, the answer to Ben on the live stream is this is not a random sampling because random sampling is hard to do, so far as we know. That's a future thing, is to figure out how to do random sampling. Oh boy. Did you already do the simplification here and this is the result?
Yes, this is a complicated one. So possibly the second usage message. Well, here going forward.
Well, no, we've reviewed sorted entity class. Is that correct?
Yes, we did.
Okay, except we got it wrong because it doesn't refer to any of the other entity class functions. Come on, guys.
Although, I mean, where? In the CALSOs?
Yes, in the
All
CALSOs.
refer to all 6 of the others?
No, I don't think so. I think it should refer to the ones that are relevant.
Then maybe just entity class. Because it's the only one that you can do filtering with.
Well, what about sampled entity class? I think that's relevant here. Okay. So we did review filtered entity class.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're missing extended.
Okay, all right, let's go there. Okay, all right, okay, so aggregated is complicated, so let's do extended first. Okay. Okay, what does entity func take? What do you apply entity func to?
I mean, entity func is applied. It's not applied to anything right now, but it's going to be applied to each entity in class.
No. It's going to be applied to the entity.
To each single entity in class.
Okay, in order to give the value of that function.
Yes.
Derived from class. But derived. See, does the class, okay, represents an entity class. I would like to use the word extended since it's in the name of the function.
Instead of saying add a new, you can say extended by the new.
No, that's even more obscure, I think. Yeah.
Also, I think what's really missing here is to make clear that f has always to be an entity function, not just an arbitrary function we come up with.
Okay, fair enough. Is that true even in the case of in-memory entity stores?
So we don't want to make a distinction between the ones. So
no, I understand that, but I'm asking you, does it work if you have a non-entity function there for in-memory ones? Why not? Why not make it work?
So we could make it work after some consideration, maybe, but what happens if you start with an in-memory store, start developing your program, switch to another backend, and it stops working? So the idea is
All
that independent of the backend, the functionality works the same.
But that's lowest common denominator. I mean, if you have some
Yes.
backend, some brain dead, database backend that doesn't support, I don't know, dates or something, does that mean you can't use dates? That argument is not going to work to say it's always lowest common denominator, because the lowest common denominator is a
No, but it's different, Stephen, because for dates example you gave, we basically give a contract that we implement the missing features. So it's not like we always pick the ones that are the lowest common denominator. We also step up to it when necessary, but it's a part of a query language. So if you start blurring this distinction,
all right, okay. For now, I'll agree with you. I'm not convinced for the future, but I'll agree with you for now. Okay. So, represents an entity class. See, what's confusing to me is that the entity class, the idea that an entity class contains a property, represents derived but extended by adding a new computed property name. Does it have to be a string there? The computed property name?
Yes.
Okay. New computed property quotes name obtained from each entity in the class by applying the entity function f. Do you believe in that?
That's now grammatically not right, because it's not a property that is obtained by the property value.
Okay.
Well, if we go into such detail, we might as well, I don't know whether it's worth, definitely not in this place, but at some point we need to say that this application sometimes happens on the backend side. So it's not like...
Yeah, I understand. Represents an entity class derived from class. I'm going to but extended by adding a new computed property name whose value for each entity is obtained by applying the entity function f. Seem reasonable?
Why is entity function there not linking to entity function?
I hate saying that. The entity function.
Can't you just leave function out? Yeah, like that.
I hate doing that. I don't like using that as an adjectival form. I mean, I hate using our function names as adjectives like that. I don't really like doing this. For some reason, it's gotten us in all kinds of trouble. I'm going to say this. Oh, I hate this. You know what? I'm just going to say by applying the entity function f, and then we'll explain it. Okay, so here, this is just f1, f2, defined by the functions f sub I. Okay, now let's explain what's going on. What is this? Appended with what? Okay, so first of all, in extended entity class, class name arrow f, the function f must be an entity function object. Okay.
Did you see that that rule didn't turn into a rule?
Yeah, I don't understand that. That seems wrong. Okay, let's look at this. We've got a bunch of interesting comments on the live stream, which we'll look at in just a second. What is this? Entity properties is effectively with this appended. Yes, I agree. Is that the okay? Okay. Can be used to get values for what? What does it do if the thing has? I don't understand. If the thing has that name, what does it do if the class already has that name?
It shadows the previous one. So I think,
Well, you got to
strictly
say
speaking,
that. We got to say it.
No, it's actually not shadowing, but instead
No, it doesn't. It doesn't shadow.
disambiguate the string form anymore. So you have to use the full form of each entity property.
no, wait a second.
No, it doesn't shadow, Leonid.
The latest one, you should be able to still use string, right? But the other ones which were there before, you can get to only by using the full one, correct or not?
What
Not
happens
no.
if, look, if I have a class that has, height and weight in it, okay, with those names, and then I say extended entity class, weight arrow, something or other, how do I disambiguate between the weight that was already there and the weight that I added?
Using an entity property with either just a type or the complex type in the first argument.
But how does that help me? If that class already had that thing called weight, how do I refer to the weight which I added versus the weight which I...
No,
oh, this thing. Oh, I see.
Stephen, yeah, the first argument will be different.
Okay, all right.
But my point has been
better.
that you can still use the short thing, the name, just for the most recently defined property. And the other ones that were there before will be accessible by a longer first argument entity property. That's what I wanted to say.
But it's actually not true, at least in the current implementation.
No?
No. As soon as you have an ambiguity, it does not choose one for you.
Oh, so you're saying as soon as there is an ambiguity, you have to always define entity property with a long one?
Yes.
And what if you don't and just use a string? It will give you an error?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Okay, so listen. Here's what we got to say here. Okay, so entity, so extended entity class Okay. I think what we want to say, I've got an idea how to say this. Extended entity class can be used, whoops. Well, okay, wait a minute. Okay, well, we could say entity value of class, comma, quotes name, can be used to get from an extended entity class, so long as, oh gosh, that's really confusing. Okay, hold on, let's try this. This can be used even if class already has a property with the specific, with whose name is name. Great. Even if class already has a property whose name is, quotes, new. In this case, the property the new, okay, works, adds a new computed property. In this case, however, the new computed property must be referred to, new computed property must be referred to by the full form entity property of entity class, blah, 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 like this, right?
Yes.
Oh, let me ask something. And the old one should also be referred since this change by the full form, no?
No, the old one can be referred to by its this case, however, the new computed property must be referred to by the form using the full. Okay, now we can say if a new property, if the name of a new property does not conflict with the names of any existing properties, then entity value of class, comma, new can be used to get values of the new property. Right?
Yes.
Okay, and this, okay, now this one here, entity properties, let's see. One thing we should say, I think we should say this first. Entity property, for an extended entity class, the name, the full name of the new property added is this whole thing, entity property of extended entity class, or is that a tautological statement?
It's probably not. It's good to refer to just another time to tell it, because it might not be very obvious.
It's this, right?
Yes.
Okay, then we don't need to say this because that's pretty obvious. And we don't need to say that either. Okay, now here, what on earth is with doing there?
Well, my proposal for that function would have been this added property or something like that. So it's similar to this in that it holds something that you introduced temporarily.
Except it does it from inside out rather than from outside in.
Yes.
So that might be confusing in that sense. And also, it's not a scoping construct really, while with is.
I mean, I think that the way to think about it is like we're introducing a new constant, only that the semantics is different, but in that sense, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, but there are at least two differences which are pretty important, and which I just mentioned.
Can I look at what the C also should be here, by the way? I don't understand the with. Does that survive, or is that I don't understand that at all? Can I remove it? By the way, this should surely refer to entity store, which certainly has computed properties in it. Or am I totally confused?
Yes. So for entity stores, that's a different mechanism to add those properties directly in the store.
Okay, and this should probably refer to, I don't know whether it's combined or aggregated entity class.
Probably aggregated.
All right, let's take a look at the comments on our live stream here. Let's see. Okay, wait a minute. Seth is saying if you write entity properties of extended entity class, you get an ugly output. If you wrap canonical name, you get something more attractive. So what's the issue there? Is the issue that we don't have print forms for entity property?
I think that it's going to be fixed soon, right, Tony? Now that external user haven't seen it yet, but with the design work we did for single entities, I'm sure it should apply also to entity property. When it's complex, it should just gain an icon.
Is that right, Tony?
Well, we haven't explicitly discussed that yet.
Okay, can I look at an example? Where's a good example to look at here? Just in general.
Well, just take the first example in extended entity class and apply entity properties to it.
Okay, so this. Okay, that's okay. Now we say entity properties. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? What the heck is this? Oh, that's because.
That's because counter is a lot of properties.
Yeah, okay. All right. Ay. Okay, is there anything we can do about that? Well, I mean, this isn't obviously hopeless.
Why is it hopeless? We have
I
those
said
nice
it's not obviously hopeless. I mean, it's a complicated concept that's going on here. The only thing that's nasty is the repetitiveness of all of this.
Yeah, but Stephen, if we allied it with the same icons that we did for the entities, then it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you can see a way to do that, that's fine. I'm not thinking that through completely. Okay, let's continue here. If you extend an entity class, then perform various operations, can you delete the properties you created via the extend? What's the answer to that?
Can you repeat
The answer is
The
that
answer is, can you restrip? Can you, if you've
no,
got,
and I mean, it doesn't. You can with entity value. Entity value is the thing that you use to say, I just want these ones. It doesn't really make sense.
But that gives you the values. What you can't get, okay, let's say you have got an entity class, you've puffed it up by adding various extensions to it, and then you want to deflate it again and remove extensions.
What for? I mean,
I don't know.
The point is that
what's going on, but I mean, it doesn't matter because it's not going to compute anything. It's all lazy computation.
Yeah, exactly. So it's only when you ask for entity value that you, I mean, maybe we should have something in entity value that says except. If you have 15,000 and you want to remove one.
What do you mean? You mean, I see. You mean that you want to give a data set or something of all but 3 of them or something. Well, then just list them. I think that's, I'm not.
I mean, I just think that in the entity word, the projection, what is called projection in the relational word doesn't really make much sense.
All right, let's keep reading down these comments, and then we need to go back to the other functions we have to cover. Okay, if you add an entity to a homebrewed entity class, is there a way to delete it? Add an entity. Suppose you could use filtered entity class. Okay, so you add an entity to an entity class. Can you delete the entity? I'm not sure we've thought about that. Reasonable question. Okay, hold on. Let's take a look here. So,
well, Stephen, this is more like a mutation if you are speaking about the same class, and we don't have operations which change that.
Right. Okay. So what we have is a way to take. Okay. So what you're saying is all we can do is to symbolically encrust something which is there. We don't get to write back anything into the database, for example.
It's first thing. And the second thing I'm saying is that except for combined entity class, which in some cases you can think of as adding few things, we don't have things yet in our set of primitives that will add anything to existing entity class in terms of entities. So you can add properties, but we don't yet have primitives to add entities or do anything similar.
I see. So extended entity class is a property extended entity class, not an entity extended entity class.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, hold on. List instead of entity class. Right. So Ben on the live stream is talking some more about the random sampling business. My opinion is that what we will do eventually is that sampled entity class will eventually be quotes random. Right now we're saying it's based on the internal representation, which means it's stable. Well, it's somewhat stable across calls, but I think in the future we'll say in future we'll make it have random seeding and so on.
Well, but it's not so easy, Stephen, because we still need the primitive that currently stands for sampled entity class just to take a part of it with certain ordering in some cases.
Fine. Well, then maybe we had random sampled. I think we haven't. Right. Yeah, so Seth is suggesting making an analogy and documentation between extended entity class and adding columns to a table. I agree that that is a useful thing too. So I agree. We could say extended entity class effectively adds a column to each to a table representing with a specified name and with to the table adds a column to a table representing to a database table representing class with the new column named new and having values f of entity sub I.
One problem with this is that in the future, we might have fields which are represented by more than one column in a table. And so in that case, maybe we can then change this in the future when we start supporting these things.
Yeah, I think this is useful. It's a useful comment because it somehow slightly deobfuscates what's going on. Effectively adds a column to a database table representing class.
And also, I think this should be upper in there.
Yes. Well, actually, let's put it under this. Effectively adds a column to a database table representing class with a new column named new and having values having value f of entity I for each entity I. Okay, next. Okay, what happens to entity of bacterium when the bacterium splits in two? Yeah, good question. This is a whole welcome to the world of entities and objects and so on. Protection entity class. Yeah, we know about restricted entity class. Okay, piece of trivia for everybody. I once met E.F. Codd. There was sometime as an old chap at that time in the early-ish 80s, and he had written a book about cellular automata, and it was that was I think what he studied before he studied before he was at IBM studying relational algebra and so on. He had worked on cellular automata. There, just a piece of trivia. And needless to say, when I met Mr. Codd, we talked primarily about cellular automata, and I had no idea he was working on relational databases. Okay, so Seth is commenting on, by mistake you add a bunch of stuff. Well, but you know what? Your underlying database is not modified by anything you do here. You can just go back to whatever, there's just a bunch of big symbolic structure. And I would say if you want to get rid of extensions that you've made, just use that class inside without, everything you have is represented by the symbolic structure you've built up. You don't, I think if you want to unwind it, just go back on that symbolic structure. It's not like something happened in the background that updated it. Does that make sense to people?
Oh, you know what, Stephen? I think then our remark about the effectively adds a column to a database table isn't quite correct. We should say it adds a column to a query, to a virtual table represented by a query, something like that.
Effectively represents
virtual table.
Well, a database table.
A virtual database table. Derived from
class with the new column
added, yeah.
With a new column named new added with values f of entity I for each entity of entity I. Okay, hold on. Let's okay, wait a minute. So you know, somewhere in all of this stuff, we should say, every one of these functions should say extended entity class works with, this is going to be boilerplate for a bunch of these, works with relational database objects with both relational database and entity store objects. Is that correct?
That's a little bit, I mean, entity stores are also built from relational database objects. So they are all entity stores. We want to say that it works for different backends.
Okay, works with any entity store, but you don't have to explicitly have an entity store around your relational database. There's no explicit mention of entity store.
I'm afraid you have to. Because if you don't register that entity store, you can't even start your workflow with the relational database.
I see. Okay, works with any entity store object, whether defined explicitly or based on an external Is that a useful statement?
I think so.
Okay, then this is boilerplate we need to add to essentially every one of these entity class operating functions.
And it probably has to be also rather high in the list of things we mentioned here.
Okay, not everything can be at the top.
Yeah, I know, but because it's generic, it should be, I think it should be upper than things related to specifically relational database things, etc.
Well, okay, so where do you want to put it?
I think third, maybe. Actually, no, even second.
All right. Okay, let's keep going here. Yeah, Ben on the live stream is pointing out that we keep on obsessing about database connections. That's because this is the team that's worked on database connections mostly. But that these things are also very useful for ordinary entity store constructs, which I agree with. All right, can we okay, so by the way, so this would have in it that's just a sample of how this would work. Okay, let's keep going now. So what we've got to do next, okay, combined entity class. Oh boy. Oh boy, is this really complicated? Which should I do first? If we're going to run out of time, which one should we have done? Should we have done aggregated?
And they're both pretty important.
Okay. Well, let's see if I can wrap my brain around any of them. Okay, represents a class of entities obtained by merging the properties of pairs of entities
Maybe it should say combining now that we changed the name of the from merge to combined.
Especially since that's what I read. By combining the properties of pairs of entities from class 1 and class 2, by combining the properties of those pairs of entities from class 1 and class 2, for which, is that right?
Yep.
Yes.
Those pairs of entities from class 1 and class 2, for which prop
Has the same value, I guess.
yeah, has the same value, for which the value of prop is the same, for which you know, any function whose description is that complicated is hard to understand. It's a class of entities.
Yeah, but it's one of the most non-trivial operations in this algebra.
Okay. Okay, represents a class of entities for which all the values of the properties prop I were containing only entities for only those entities. Wait a minute. Pairs of entities. Is it the same entity?
You take one from class 1 and one from class 2. And you compare all pairs.
No, I understand that. But then this is saying represents a class of entities containing only.
I think the start of this should be the same as in the first definition, because we still look at pairs of entities, and the only thing that is different is that we are comparing not one property but several of them.
Yeah. Represents a class of entities obtained properties. Well, okay, wait a minute. Look, why don't we just say combines pairs of entities where all for which the values of all the properties prop I are the same. Is that reasonable?
The same for both entities in the pair, again.
Well, but it's just simplify. I mean, it's just, I don't think we need to repeat that. Okay, so here, okay, so this is, doesn't this case, wait a minute, this case really should be something like L and R, because it's going to, because you can also have this, can't you? You can have a list of pairs of properties.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't like this. This is, how would we number this? Wait a minute. This is confusing. See what I'm saying?
Yes. Still in the second usage line, should it say corresponding property values are the same? Because not all have to be the same.
Pairs of entities for whose values?
That means prop
For
1
which
doesn't have
the
to be prop
corresponding values. You want to add the word corresponding there.
somewhere. Yes.
Which I don't know whether that really helps. But which are the corresponding values? Okay, the thing I'm worrying about is the indexing of 1, 2 here, because we've got class 1, class 2. But yet these prop 1s aren't the same as the 1, 2s here. I don't think I've ever done it this way, but I think we could just say prop A, prop B, and so on here. I think we have to do that. I think otherwise it's super confusing. I think that's what we have to do. Okay, so this. Okay, here we're saying okay, we have some comments on the live stream I'm going to look at for a second. Right now we can write entity of property 1, property 2, and create a new entity. In an entity store, you're saying you can use entity of property equals value 1 value equals value in an entity store. How do you get rid of that property if you made a mistake in an in-memory entity store? Can't you just use equals dot? Tony?
Yes, unset should be supported.
Is that documented somewhere?
I guess not.
Better document it. And it might be even needs to be on a guide page. If we have, is there a guide page that talks about L values for entity store?
But Stephen, I think we should be pretty careful with mutations, because if later on, for some reason, we decide to support some kind of schemas also for in-memory entity stores, then it
Well,
won't.
that bridge is already crossed. You can already do L value stuff in Tony's entity store framework, correct, Tony?
Yes.
But is it documented? Like, for example, removing a property from a single entity in all cases?
Well, the only thing that's documented is entity of property equals value.
So it's not yet documented, Stephen.
Mm.
I mean,
well, I kind of agree with you that it would be nice to be able to add a schema layer there.
And if we do that, we should think carefully about mutations, because otherwise we will create backwards incompatibilities.
Well, are you confident that the entity of property equals value is okay?
No,
yes.
I'm
Well,
not.
I mean, it can be, because if entity of property is equal to value, then at least you are not removing a property on a single entity basis. You are you can have type mismatch, but you can't have things like of the same class. Some properties have some entities have some properties and others don't, which will be completely breaking the schema if it exists.
Yeah, hey, listen, I've got a logistical thing here. Can we push this polyhedron thing at least 15 minutes later? Somebody do that.
Yeah, I can tell Alex.
See, and there is another thing that it's kind of worrying me about entity store. And it's the fact that, I mean, we deprecated dollar entity stores. But now there's entity stores open close, and they can't get out of sync. And I think that's wrong.
What can get out of sync?
Okay, so if you say you do dollar entity stores equal a list with an entity store in it.
But we didn't have dollar entity stores. It's gone.
We have it still, and it still works.
I don't care. I don't care. It's not documented. As far as I'm concerned, it's an internal feature. I don't care about it. So let's just go through some of these other things on the live stream. Let's come back to this, okay? entity value is a resolver and should not be mixed up with the primitive projected entity class, which is the algebraic and inverse of extended entity class. We obviously need to think about projected entity class. Let's put that on the shelf for right now. Okay, entity list of entity class something comma all is changed whenever you add any registered entity store object, says Seth. Do we need to worry about okay, wait a minute. Yeah, Carl is pointing out the statement is generic, and so it should be high up in the documentation is not a sensible thing. Like, it requires internet access is down at the bottom usually, but yes, I think this is slightly different. Okay, Drago is saying that we should reconsider the documented feature that extended entity classes can have two properties with the same name.
But the full name of a property is not the string. I mean, it's just a convenience that the string works.
So the issue is whether we should go out on a limb and document the fact that the things can clash, or whether we should merely, I think we do need to do that. I think we need to do that. I'm okay with that. Seth is commenting that you're letting users add to entity store. So Seth is merely is basically saying we should document unset of entity of property, even if we don't have any of these multi-setting things and so on. And I kind of agree with that. By the time we have entity of property equals value be documented, we better have entity of property equals dot be documented as well.
Yeah, but Stephen, if you remember my argument from 5 minutes ago, if that unsetting is not yet documented, I think we should at least think about this in conjunction with the bigger picture, where we might consider also a schema for.
But why is unsetting? Haven't we already crossed the bridge of implementing something by the time we have setting? Why is unsetting any different?
Because if you are removing entity property altogether from an entity, it's different from just unsetting its value to some default value. So if unsetting means that you are simply setting a value to some default, then it's fine. If unsetting means that you are totally removing property from a...
I see, then you're changing the schema.
Yes. And not in a way that is compatible with the schema, because in the schema you can only change table wise, not
no, I understand. I understand. So what do you do? The question is, what do you set it to? Do you set it to missing not set or something? If you say equals dot, are you effectively
missing. I would be fine with missing, but not with removal of a property.
Okay, so the question is, would it be consistent, which I don't think it is, to have equals dot set something to missing? That's very weird. I mean, that's not what equals dot usually does. Anybody else want to comment on this?
Well, if you take an association and then you do equal dot, and then you try to extract that thing, then you get a missing. I think that's the...
I see what you're saying. Right.
If that's actually a good example.
It is a good example.
That's similar to socks in spirit.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I kind of agree. That makes sense. All right, that makes sense. Now, but the question is of what's stored. I mean, in terms of what the user sees, what will come out is missing not set. And whether that is what is explicitly stored in the database or not is up to us. Okay, but now, okay, so Seth is now saying, but what if he wants to remove an entity?
We will have that functionality, I'm pretty sure, just not for this release. That will require another primitive that we currently don't have in this algebra of things we defined.
How do you add an entity? How do you add an entity in this whole world? I mean, we've got
Indirectly.
Class. Well, but how?
Entity of property equals value, and if the entity doesn't exist yet, it is introduced.
Okay, but here's a question. We've got a thing called extended entity class, right? That is in fact extending the entity class by virtue of adding properties. We could extend the entity class by virtue of adding entities. What does that?
We don't have it yet, but one way of doing that would be to have an operation similar to SQL union all or union, where you would just combine entities that you want to add into a entity class, and then you join two entity classes, but join in this sense.
Okay, so I'm concerned about the following thing. The name extended entity class. What do we think the name will be for an entity class which has had entities added to it?
It would be, I think it would be something like union entity class or joined entity class, because it will still operate on entity classes, not on single entities. It's not going to be like append. It's going to be
I
like
understand that. I'm just worried about the term extended being, how are you extending it? I mean, it's a property extended entity class as well.
You get that problem also with combined, if you think about it.
Why?
Because you are combining effectively on the properties, but you could be combining on the entities as well. That's why the word join in SQL is confusing to people who come from the Wolfram language. And that's why we call it join across, because it's like one is horizontal, one is vertical. But
yes. Okay. Why do I think this is not going to be the last meeting in this series?
Oh, by the way, Stephen, you have this the third line definition contains something which is underlined red. So there is.
I'm aware because I was typing in that word
okay,
when we got distracted.
Okay.
Okay. All right, let's go back to this and try and wrap this for a second here. Okay, so here combines pairs of entities. Combiners. It's a nice word, actually. That's something cross between. Never mind. Conspire and combines pairs of entities for which pairs of entities from class 1 and class 2 for which the value of prop 1 of the entity from class 1 is the same as the value of prop 2 for the entity from class 2. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
I think that could be the second usage line.
Okay.
And then we generalize to a list for both cases.
Right. Okay. Combines pairs of entities which for the property specifications for which all the property specifications P spec K agree. Note for, I've forgotten again who's PMing this, for Andrea.
Andrea.
Yes, sorry.
It's okay.
Note for you, we need to figure out how to format these A's and B subscripts correctly,
Okay.
because that's not the standard DocuTools thing. Okay. Oh boy. Well, shouldn't this be the third thing?
That's somewhat different. F in that case is a general condition that allows you to do anything with the entities
No, I
that come
understand.
from left and
Oh,
right.
I see. Represents. Okay. Okay. Combines pairs of entities for which the application of the entity function F yields true. Right?
Yes.
Uses JSpec to determine when to allow entities containing missing elements. Okay, I get it. What the heck is this? Supported by the last two arguments. What does that mean?
Maybe I should have said third and fourth.
But what does it even mean? I mean, the spec
Okay,
and
well,
JSpec.
I go more in detail later. You can delete it. It's not very important.
Okay.
I mean, what I'm slightly worried about is that there is one of the usage messages, the third, namely now, which might be a usage. Sorry, the third detail might need a usage message.
The third detail of what?
Of combined entity class cannot have two identical first arguments.
Sorry, say that again. The
combined entity class cannot have two identical first arguments.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Why is this?
Well, how do you distinguish them then?
Because
It's
otherwise
actually-
all the properties will be ambiguous still.
You know, this is the case where you like joining one person with their father. And so they both have properties.
I see. You have to name the property. What is that syntax for entity property there? Is that a new wacky syntax for entity property?
I mean, now entity property can have a complex first argument, as we've seen with extended entity class.
Well, there's a whole algebra of those aliased properties and types that we might have to review.
Is this the first time I've seen one?
We have probably shown
No.
that to you before.
No, it's not the first time you see it. So the general rule is this: when an entity class-like construct adds properties, so the first entity class-like construct to add that thing gets put in the first argument.
You know, what bothers me about this whole thing is, you know, relational algebra is a fairly clean set of concepts at some level, I guess. I'm
Yeah,
just
but
worried
nobody.
that- yeah.
The problem is that nobody in the wild world really ever implemented relational algebra, because it works with sets and you want to be sorting. There's all sorts of little things that make any kind of implementation of SQL deviate from relational algebra.
But it's not only that. It's also that entity model doesn't really 100% follow relational algebra. And for example, when relational algebra doesn't state what you do with the properties with duplicated names, it just states that you can rename them, but then it's up to you how you do that.
Yeah. It's the underbelly of practically every formal computer sciencey type thing, from nested lambdas to other things. This business about, and then you have to and the names have to be the renaming thing is a nasty underbelly of a lot of things. I understand.
And actually, Stephen, while we're at it, I have to say that I think we've come up with a very, very nice and very well thought out scheme to rename things, which is clean and just has a few orthogonal concepts. So
well, in this, for this particular case, I mean, the fact is that renaming in general, like with nested lambdas and so on, is that's a total mess. I mean,
yeah, but for this particular case, I
wonder whether we can learn something for that case from I mean, because the case that is a total mess right now is, I mean, and by the way, this is not our mess. This is a mess that's been around for at least 100 years. And I think we get credit for syntax coloring that mess. But there's the mess. Now, is there a way to use what we are doing now for these? Probably not.
I don't think so, because here the problem arises from us using a single flat namespace. And in other languages, this problem is solved by using nested namespaces.
Oh, this isn't solved. The nested lambdas thing, I mean, we have plenty of namespaces too, and if we change the namespace, we'd obviously get the right, we'd be able to do this.
No, Stephen, we still have a flat namespace. We have nested names for them, but they are all in a single flat symbol table. We don't have nested symbol tables, so to speak.
Yeah, but that wouldn't, I mean, well, whatever. I don't think that helps you.
That would help here, certainly.
How? Why?
But the price for that would be that function will no longer be transparent for pattern matching or things like that. It will become a black box.
Yeah.
So there is a price to pay for that. And so maybe for Wolfram language, it's just the wrong thing to do because the price is too high. We want function to remain transparent to pattern matching and other things.
Right, but the fact is what you're doing here, because this is all lazy, I think the reason this works, there's several reasons this works. I mean, see, you're forcing a name here. I mean, this alias forcing a name. I mean, clearly what I could do here is I could say, foo backtick this, and then I have no problem. Right?
Yeah, we certainly don't have the level of automation in this construct for entity classes that automatic scoping gives us in other cases. But in a sense, we don't consider this as really a scoping. I mean, a fully automatic scoping construct in a way.
All right.
So
okay. Let's
when
come
we
back.
ask people to alias, we are kind of asking them to participate in creating these unique namespaces.
Let's look at aggregated entity class for a second before we go into these notes here. On the hope that it'll be the same set of issues. Representative entity class containing what? Okay, I don't understand this at all. Containing a single entity with a single entity property. What is this? So this is like forgetting the total of an entity of some. Can somebody explain this? Hello, somebody talking.
Yeah. So basically,
look at the first example, Stephen.
Okay.
How does it deal with missings? I mean, obviously it really should have a cleaner way of dealing with missings than to have to say, I mean, I don't even know whether delete missing works on this.
Probably not. But I mean, in SQL, there is a clear syntax, but a clear semantics of how missings are treated. So in SQL, that missing would be treated as 0.
Well, why? Because total has some kind of, I mean, you know, it's some, what is the identity element?
Well, because the identity element of sum is 0.
No, I understand that, but how does it know that? I mean, in other words, then you have to define for a given entity function.
Well, the point is that the aggregators.
No, Carl, I'm not sure that total returns 0 as default in SQL. The total of an empty set might return missing.
Yeah, total of an empty set returns missing, but total of 2 and missing is 2. That's one I'm sure of.
Okay, but so how do we do this? Because this is going to come up all the time, that there's going to be missing data in the aggregator, and it's a mess.
Well, I mean, for SQL, it's not a big problem because basically there are 5 widely used and defined, backends aggregators, and they are like total, mean, standard deviation, count, mean, and max, and that's it. So
I have a
it's not very.
Well, don't we have a thing called missing function? Is that right? What was it called? The
query has an option called missing behavior.
Okay. What is this? How does this relate to the stuff on machine learning functions? I thought we had something called missing.
There is one in temporal data that's called missing data method.
Oh, great. I think we have a little bit of a mess on our hands. I think missing behavior and missing data method are similar. What is missing data rules? Oh, no. Oh, gosh. All right, listen, this is going to require another discussion. This is going to require, what's going to be needed in the end is missing value pattern is going to need to be supported with default underscore missing, probably. Then some combined version of missing data rules, missing data method, and missing behavior needs to be brought into these functions. And I don't think this is right either. Missing string should surely be combined with like missing behavior. Okay, we should have in the we should have a missing meeting, so to speak, to talk about these. Andrea, could you define that and get it scheduled? Yes. And we'll need an additional set of people who have been involved in these various functions here. So the machine learning folk.
Who are the people from machine learning?
Well, I'll ask Etienne, but probably Etienne himself. And also that missing string thing, I think that's Jerome's. And I don't even know what missing style is. That's yet another, oh my golly gosh. This is embarrassing. There's been, look at this. This is, I mean, and I'm sure I've been involved in every one of these. So this is just embarrassing because what we've got here is Yeah, I mean, missing style, missing behavior, missing data method, they're all related, closely related. Humph. I mean, they're all a little different, but they should be combined, or at least have a well understood correspondence. So in this case, well, we're not going to get it for this version, obviously, but I think in the future we should expect to have some missing behavior type option. Now, Seth is pointing out, and I think correctly, that entity function could have that. Is that right? Is that right? Is it entity function that would have that? Because
There is
isn't
also
it late,
default value option, Stephen, in that might help here.
in what?
Default value was an option we introduced for templating, for template slots.
Okay, can you make sure, Andrea, that's something else for the missing meeting?
Okay, so we will have two meetings. One to finish documentation that we are just having just very few things left, and the other one about with the other teams about missing things.
That is correct.
Okay.
And the first of those is has to be done for version 12 to be wrapped up. The second one is not going to make it for 12.0.
Okay. Yeah, but we are almost done with documentation. The updated, the old functions, the old symbols, you already passed through them, but I think Carlo and Tony made updates.
Okay,
So
I understand. But hold on, I just want to understand, where does the missing treatment go? Because it's already too late, isn't it? By the time entity function, what is being given as the argument? What is E here? What is E?
Well, in that case, it's a whole class, not one entity.
Okay, but so the resolution of the missingness only happens when that class is shattered into a list. That's the time when it knows that it had something missing. It's not that the whole of, see what I'm saying? So it's deep inside the entity function that the missingness shows up.
Yeah.
And I don't think we can say any missing that shows up, just set it to 0, because we could say total and then we could have something which is a product or something and we want to set it to 1. I mean, it depends on what function it's in.
Yeah, so one thing we could do is to set default behavior for each of the aggregated functions we're supporting. But
yeah, right. Seth is pointing out that that it needs to be an aggregated entity class, that the missingness, because it's that property there, that we need to say if it's missing. Yeah, it's two levels of stuff here, right? So that property is being aggregated with that function f. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but that's a result, not the property that is being aggregated. That's a resulting property, and it can involve complicated.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying if this f here represents an entity class, what is the name of that entity? That sole entity that's there?
Can be anything.
Well, what do you mean can be? But it is something definite, right? It must generate something for that name.
I thought it's just an either empty list or 1. I don't remember what we decided at the end.
Blah. Blah. 1?
Carlo, do you remember?
But wait a second. How does this return? How is this even an entity class at the end of it? Oh, I see, because you're asking for the value. So if I were to do this without that value resolver there.
Yeah, try entity list of this. Yeah, it's an empty list.
What is that?
It's
That's
an empty
just
list.
weird.
No, it's an empty list of properties. So this is consistent.
Why is that consistent?
Look at take the example below.
Is a constant.
Go look at the example below.
Which example? This one here?
This one, yeah. Do empty list on that one.
This one here?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Oh, what a mess. All right. We have to have another meeting. And yes, I agree. The discussion about missing data is a more general problem.
Okay.
I don't like this. Whatever this is a hack. Whatever you're doing here, it's a hack. The fact that it's nothing there and then it's 1, 2, 3, 4 here. Come on, guys.
I mean, it's 1, 2, 3 because those are the periods.
What?
Yeah, I mean, if you aggregate by continent, you get continents there. In this case, periods are called 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
It's not a generated thing, Stephen, in this case.
Okay, fine. But in this case, it is generated.
I mean, it's the limit inversion. If you do aggregate density in the last argument of that period, you put period and group.
Yeah, then you'll get both of them. Okay. All right, okay. I retract. It does seem reasonable. Okay, but so then so you're starting the documentation with this corner case. What's the difference between this case here? I am really confused.
This is the shorthand you proposed, so that you can just write population goes to total instead of having to write density function.
Yes, I understand. We better have this. How on earth are we going to document that? I think we're going to have to say okay, let me try one try for this. An entity class containing a single entity with the property prop whose value is the result of applying function f to class, basically. Now we have to define what that function f is later. There are two forms for that function f. Okay, so here we just say f1, f2, etc., etc., etc. Then we remove this and we say in this thing here, the function f can either be an entity function object or can be a function fun that will be treated That will be something like that, I think.
But so this means that the prop in this case is at the same time the property over which we aggregate and the property and the name of the resulting aggregated property in the result, right?
That's kind of stupid, isn't it?
Yeah, but I don't see how in this syntax you can separate the two, because you basically need two, not one in general.
Well, it's not completely stupid. If this was a mean, for example, it would be okay. I mean, it's okay. So then it's the same named property, or does that tangle up somewhere else?
No, probably not. But it says nothing about the action that was performed to aggregate. And it basically says just what the property was used.
No, it says the action is fun, which could be mean, for example.
Yeah, I'm saying the name of the resulting property doesn't say anything about.
Exactly. Yes, but that's okay. If look, in other words, if you want to say, okay, population, for example, you want to say total. The population of the entity class is going to be the total of the populations of the entities in it. And you don't really need to say total population. Population is enough. The population of Europe is the sum of the populations of its countries.
Yeah, but what if you are doing the average? It will still say population.
That's correct. So don't do average in that case, because this is the shorthand case, which we've used many times, where you're basically saying, like the average, the temperature in January is, you'll want the average, if you just ask for the temperature in January, you're going to get the average temperature in January. I think it's right. I think this is okay. All right, let's try to get this next meeting soon. I am doing this trip on Wednesday, so let's try to get it before then, please.
Okay.
Let me just see the live stream here. One. Maybe users have to specify how to handle missings in aggregated entity class. Yeah, with better behavior in the future, I agree. Think of basic aggregated entity class, creating a table with a single row and as many columns as you have aggregation functions. I agree. When you add groupings, it creates a table with as many rows as groups. Yes. Yes, right. As many columns as aggregation functions.
No, that's as many columns as aggregation function is not correct. It will have as many columns
as these prop I.
Okay, so if you have both prop and grouping, the number of properties is the sum of prop and grouping, basically, sum of the length of those.
No, that doesn't make sense to me, because this grouping is giving entities.
Basically, the properties that form the aggregated properties in the second case, they form the primary key of the new entities.
Right.
And they are separate from the properties obtained through aggregations.
Listen, unfortunately, I have to go deal with something else here. A minor polyhedron emergency. Hard to believe that there are such things. Okay. Okay, so we will continue. Let me push these changes back. Thanks very much to everybody including folks on the live stream who made all kinds of useful suggestions. Much appreciated. All right. See you guys soon then.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.